Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. And today we have a very interesting conversation and a very interesting guest. Today's conversation is titled, What is an Influencer? And we have today with us Mr. Timothy Tiah, the king of the POV, as some people have called you.
Really?
And
I don't know. Yeah.
also, what some people might say is the original influencer king. You
Yeah.
are the founder of Nuffnang, and that was an influencer agency which some of you who are more old school, old generation might know about. And you're also the founder of Colony Coworking, and also you were the EY Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year in 2015. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
All
Yeah.
right, so let's jump right into it. Tim, what is an influencer?
Yeah, it's I had a morning run this morning. And I was actually thinking about this question that you could ask me because I saw your story. At first it was just bloggers in the social media world. And influencer came about when Instagram came about, right? And in initial stages we used to call them like um Instagrammers or Twitterers, and then somehow an influencer encompasses people who are like all platforms. And now it's used very loosely. It can be micro, it can be nano influencers, anyone who has some influence on someone. And to be honest, we all have some influence on somebody, our
Mm.
parents, our friends, and all that. But there is now a change. Some people prefer to call themselves creators. Maybe it's not that they're just influencing, but they're creating value in the kind of content that they do, right? Creating content with value. But actually, I do think that that's maybe a more appropriate term because actually, we don't really have influence anymore.
Oh, interesting. What?
Nobody has influence anymore. None of the freaking influencers has influence anymore, right? All of us only have all the influence is all governed by the algorithm to get you on your For You page. Today, you can have 100,000, a million followers, right? And you can post something and it won't even land to like half of your followers if the algorithm doesn't feel it worthy. So actually, who
Mm,
the real influencer is really is the algorithm for the For You page. We're all
mm,
just living in this world. It used to be that if I have 100,000 Instagram followers, I post something, right? Okay, a good number of them will see it, 50,000, 70,000. I mean, that's not the
mm,
case. Yeah.
mm.
So, yeah, but that means it's also more democracy for the smaller influencers. So if you don't have following, you can still go viral. So in a way, it's more democratic, and it's really just not based on how many followers you got, but really how much engagement you get for your content.
That's interesting though.
Hmm.
Well, you say that about algorithms, but then you don't feel that maybe human agency plays some sort of part, like if you were to make like this particularly hot take, you were to go and we can even go on your Instagram feed right now and like we can see the range of different types of content which you've created.
Yeah,
So I will now share my screen so you can actually see right here. You've got
yeah.
a range of different things. How I went from 78 kg to 65 kg, 2,718 likes amongst other things. Toxic relationships you can't seem to walk away from right next to KLCC. Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
watch that. I can't say much about that. They
yeah,
lied to us in school, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So I mean, when I'm looking at all of this, right? So you've got like hot takes, you've got like these videos right here, and a range of other things. Clearly, they are getting like different numbers of likes. So you don't feel that like maybe your agency kind of like played a role, like your personal charisma, like what you've done, like what you've said to people might have had some sort of imprint on people that cause
Um,
them to behave a certain way.
I think that might be giving me a bit too much credit. And if you notice, right? If you notice, like my content, right? If you go back to just now, you saw like I've some that totally freaking flop. Like it's just completely shit. Like look at the captcha one. Look at
Captcha
that, man.
one.
There's probably like zero comments there and
Uh,
225 likes.
uh,
And that's the reality of the influencer game. If you look at a lot, even the popular influencers, it's not unusual for you to see like a million followers, but maybe most of the videos just totally flop and maybe they got one hit after every 10 videos.
mm,
And when I say hit, I mean when I say flop, right? Maybe they get like 20,000 views for their million followers. It's like it's really crap lah. I think yes, the kind of quality of your content does matter, and everything. And there are ways that people play the system, they game the system. Like they can rage bait, they can go into like certain echo chambers Like, there's like an angry population, let's say, like in the US, like right wing, you go for like a right wing kind of content, pro
For sure.
Trump, all this shit, right? You're gonna get a lot of engagement because there's an audience waiting for it. And
Mm,
it works in all the different angles. So there are different ways you can kind of like game that engagement, but all in all, it still really depends on the algorithm. And the algorithm changes all the time. So
mm,
honestly, I could disappear tomorrow. I could be posting content tomorrow. It can happen as soon as tomorrow. I could be posting content and you'll get no fucking views, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't complain to Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. I can't. I just or TikTok. I can't do anything. I just disappear, and nobody will even notice.
mm.
Mm.
I see. Okay. Hmm. Now, I'm just curious, right? But maybe let's go a little bit into like I guess like the Tim Tia, right? Before like you decided to even like start engaging with all of these algorithms. Because like somewhere or another, like there is some sort of like human in the loop, right? Like who's like going out there and then creating this content.
Mm.
So there was an earlier point, right, when you decided that, well, maybe this idea of influence, right, it was compelling enough that you could build a business from it. I mean, like, whether, of course, the idea of whether human beings can actually influence one another, that aside, right, like, there was an earlier point of your life when you thought to yourself, well, maybe this is something that I should go right ahead and build. And what you built was not a small company. Like, Nuffnang, I believe, was generating like what, like 10 million SGD a year or
Yeah,
something of that nature during the peak of
yeah.
its heyday, we can say. So when you were thinking about influencing, right, from an earlier time, what do you feel was different about all of that?
I think back then it was the bloggers days, and like a lot of people didn't really view bloggers as like serious reach or influence. So I went early and we had to educate the market a little bit, but fortunately it kind of worked out for us. And we do see now when people post stuff, they do drive results. So I thought it was a relatively obvious business model back then. But I say business model because the business model today has changed a lot. Like I've been out of it.
Mm,
I've sold 5 years ago. I've left the company like 8 years ago. Left Nuffnang and I sold it many years
mm,
ago. And it's really changed a lot. Like influencers still are very relevant today, but it's just that there is a huge, huge, huge supply of influencers in every tier. You won't be short. You won't be short of finding like someone with easily a few 100,000 followers of different segments.
mm,
So it is very fiercely competitive, and it's also very fiercely competitive among agencies also that do this kind of stuff that Nuffnang does. So
mm,
the business model is I think the need is still there, but the demand is still there, but the business model, just like others, has normalized to become a challenging business model.
mm. All
Yeah.
right, cool. Thank you for that. Then, to think about it, right, even though you might have this kind of like cynicism, almost, we might say, about like humans being in the loop, right? What is it that makes you want to keep on making these videos? And what is it that I guess makes you choose to create post after post after post? And bro, like, how do you even make so many videos every single day? It's like you post like
Huh.
what, at least 3 videos a day.
Yeah,
Like, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so first is like, I'm always quite nerdy. I maybe I have my ADHD, so I'm always like very interested in the different topics one, and then after I'll just like dive deep into it and then kind of study and everything, and then and now and this fits it because instead of me just doing it on my own, I end up just like doing a video about it and just sharing it. And the video is not too complicated to shoot because I just like shoot like that video and then I send it off to editing to add some stuff and then that's it, I can post it. So a video can take me like 10 minutes to shoot, but it's just that the ideation of it takes a longer time. Like that one is the one that takes longer because working on a script and all that, and if the idea comes fast, then it's fast, like half an hour. If not, it can take really an hour per video. So yeah. And honestly, I really did it at first just as a way to provide to promote my own business, Colony.
Mm,
I wasn't really so a lot of my content was very targeted at SMEs at first, or business owners or entrepreneurs and everything. But of course it slowly evolved and it became it took a life of its own. Yeah.
mm,
And honestly, I don't really know what I'm doing, bro. Like I have friends who tell me like, oh yeah, I have a friend who told me that hey, you're doing the opposite of what anyone recommends you should do on influencer. They say you should have a niche now, you should specialize and everything. I don't have a freaking niche. I don't specialize. I'm just like whatever my brain takes me. You'll see like random shit. Sometimes it's like on my Butters video or just silly carousels that are just jokes, and all that. I don't know, man. I'm just doing it for fun. I
Mm,
don't really have a plan,
mm,
and I don't know where I'm gonna be, beyond the next 2, 3 day content that I've already kind of like in the pipeline now.
I see. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
So I prepared actually an interesting little visualization for our conversation today, and I wonder what you think about this right here. So right here, actually, we have a little draggable pie chart. You can actually like
Yeah.
go right ahead and drag like the
Yeah.
different possible, I guess, reasons for a person to like participate, I guess, in content creation and so on and so forth right here. You can see
Yeah.
that money and power are listed right now as two things that have been filled in, but then like I wonder if you have like maybe a couple of possible other things, right, that you might add into that. So like you could think of this as that this doesn't currently have a label, right? But like I guess like reasons to make content. So then yeah, like what would those be for you? So I guess like we could say that money and power are one thing right here, but like maybe this one right here, it could be like, I don't know, like some sort of like social objective kind of thing. For some people, it could be like all the way down to boop,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing or everything.
Yeah.
But then it could be also that you have, I'm not sure what the last thing actually would be. I don't know, like mm, money,
Okay.
power, social
I
objective.
would say the biggest, generally, again, I think, and I can't speak for all influencers, but I would say, especially when we start, money really isn't there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like money is not this. It's very hard to build a career being an influencer because even if you get money today, right, it's not consistent. It's not something that will last.
Mm,
It's a fiercely competitive industry, lah. So I don't think money, at least in the beginning, money isn't a big part of it.
mm,
Um, I think what was a very big part, and I don't think power, power is like, okay, depending on power is if you dilute yourself, and it's very easy to dilute yourself that you are very powerful, influential. But honestly, bro, like look at my videos. I mean, would you consider me influential or have any power?
Well, I guess you get to say that Anwar Ibrahim has liked your post, and you get to say that like 100 million people maybe have viewed your post, kind of thing. But if we say power, as in like, do you get to define like the direction that society is taking? Maybe not in that context, but maybe it's power in a different way. It's
Yeah, but
hard to say.
but even then, okay, so my post maybe in the past 30 days I got like 18 million views, right? But 18 million in the grand scheme of the internet, and just the internet in Malaysia is like it's like a drop in the bucket, you know what I mean?
Right on.
So
Mhm.
I think it's too small to actually even constitute power, you know what I mean? So I can't now it's very nice to the ego to go and think like, oh yeah, okay, I am powerful and all this shit. But honestly, if you look at it honestly, it really isn't that material. It's
Mm,
not material enough for you to say that you have power or I have power,
that's fair.
you know? Um,
Oh, that's a good point, actually. So, like, maybe it's not really so much about power, but something that you also said over there was, I think, insightful. So, I'm gonna add in ego right here. Because, like, when we create content, right, maybe like
Mm.
when we're trying to influence or change things, right,
Mm.
maybe what we're changing at the end of the day really is ourselves. Like, there's that Gandhi quote, the one that goes like, he who wants to change the world must first begin by changing himself, or something like that. I don't know, like
I think the biggest reason, actually, and before I came with ego, I was actually thinking of the word like validation. I
validation.
think a
Okay,
lot
let's change
of
that.
us do it and sometimes we start it for fun, and then after that we get addicted to the validation.
Mm,
Like, when people comment, say, oh, I love your content, I love your stuff, all this stuff, and it feels good, right? It gives you a bit of a dopamine hit, and then we get addicted to that,
yeah.
and I think that's what really keeps us going, lah. And
Mm,
I think that's the biggest thing. And even as much as I try to, if I'm going to be very honest, I think that's very important. And that's also why like negative, harsh comments hurt so much because
mm,
it hits you where it hurts, you know what I mean? And for me, I'm quite, it's not my first rodeo, lah. I've been influencer for a long time, so I just know how to like, fuck,
mm,
or, um, but I think that's still a big part of like because that's the quickest, most immediate payoff that we get from doing this content. Faster
Mm,
than money, faster than fame or anything. And the most real, because we can actually see the validation in the individual comments. You can't
mm.
really see power. For you to think that you're power, you have to a bit kind of like delude yourself a bit that you have some power.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
like maybe can I share with you an example actually?
Yeah,
The most delulu example I ever heard in my entire life.
yeah,
So I went to Switzerland, right? And then like when I was in Switzerland, just doing the like hostel like visiting type thing right there, I saw an American, okay?
yeah,
So then I know he was American because like he told me he was an American. But basically he ran this very interesting website. It's called 911truther.org or something. So you can actually look that up later if you want. Basically, he would write all of these posts, right?
yeah.
That were essentially talking about how he was under pursuit, right, by the CIA, and he was talking about how the CIA is going to be bombing like this particular place at this particular time, so on and so forth on this very specific day. So
Mm,
then, interesting fact, I asked him, the date passed already, and then your bombing, right, it didn't happen. Why is that so? And he says the reason that they don't do it is because I post.
mm.
They're watching my site. And
Yeah,
whenever I post, they read my site and then they decide not to do the thing that they intended to do. So it gets to that level, bro.
yeah. So at all tiers, you know, what I mean, at all tiers of influence, even the micro ones, and there are people and sometimes I don't know, it's sometimes it's just maybe psychologists or psychiatrists can study this, like, it's just a need for validation, is
Mm,
that, they to feel that they have influence or they have importance and everything, And I think we all have that to some degree, a
mm,
need for validation.
mm,
Um, and I do too, and that's why I always try to like self-correct myself that, hey, fuck you, don't think that you have no power,
mm,
the power of an algorithm. This is all temporary anyway, and you're not big. In the scheme of the internet, in the scheme of influences, even in Malaysia, even in KL, you're not big. And that's
mm.
why I tell myself every day,
I see. That's cool. I am curious though about one final thing that I identified in this chart right here, which would be social objective.
Yeah.
Now, there's a question that's on my mind, right? Do you feel that maybe there's a sort of like social objective, or do you think that it makes sense to have a social objective when it comes to like say creating content kind of thing? I mean, like, you have outrage to a degree, but then like, outrage it happens for a reason, right? Because like there's always this sort of visceral human emotion, right, that comes out and animates these algorithms. It's not like they're kind of like divorced from the human world. It's like they're kind of like overlaid on the human world, and then in some way, shape, or form, surveillance capitalism makes it so that maybe certain things they make more money than others. But I don't know, like, is there a sort of social objective kind of thing that you
But
feel?
yeah, I tend to do that, I tend to like do content like that, but it's really more of a personal passion.
Mm,
But in reality, honestly, it's like it's if you want views and all that, it's not necessarily um like views on easy views for if you want views, you have to go for the most widest funnels, which are like the entertainment that applies to everyone, But if I do a video about like the plight of the Rohingya refugees here or something like that, like a big chunk of the population will be like, okay, this is too heavy for me, or this doesn't affect my immediate life. It's not what I'm they will disengage from it, as opposed to someone seeing a very entertaining, funny video. So honestly, like for views or for engagement, I don't think the social objectives necessarily will get you there. And so again, I do it because it's a personal passion of mine, lah. It's not for views or anything like that. For me,
mm,
I'm very humanist, Like I think the key value of humanist, I don't like to see suffering of people
mm,
and people. I mean, like just suffering, regardless of the politics, regardless of like race, religion, anything like that. I just don't like seeing suffering of people.
mm,
I find that any suffering of people is already an injustice, and there's no justifiable reason to see people dying
right.
or you know
Mm,
suffering.
absolutely. Yeah, I saw that you were making videos about like what's happening in Gaza kind of thing, and that's reflected also in like the comments that you make and things of that nature. But I find
Yeah.
that interesting though, because at least a part of me, right, is not convinced that maybe human agency, right, doesn't have a role right here. So the sort of reason I say that, right, is when we think about the thing that you mentioned, right, which is like you don't like to see suffering, right? There are at
Mm.
least two different ways of dealing with that in order to avoid the problem that you mentioned. One of
Right.
them is maybe to, well, close yourself off entirely. And then another one of them is to face the enormity of the challenge, right? And then to articulate yourself about the thing right there. So then, like, with that human agency, right? Like, I can see that you, at least to a degree, right, choose to speak out about certain things rather than avoiding them. So why, I guess, like, choose that pathway?
Really, it's just a personal passion of mine, really.
Mm,
Um, Look, I don't think it gets um look, I mean I don't think I think there's more cons to benefits of speaking about this kind of things because it's some of these issues can be very polarized.
mm,
People, there's people can see your side or they can see the other side and they can go against you, and then you get flagged for that. But also like I also some people also just like shit, like it's just like in the past you just turn on CNN and you see fucking news of like war or suffering or stuff like that. You know what I mean? And if someone keeps posting about this on Instagram, after a while, you're just like, oh, fuck, not again, not again. You get overwhelmed with this. Like I don't want to see that. It's just too heavy. And I get that.
mm,
But for me, it's just something I want to do, lah.
mm,
And I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do if you want to optimize engagement. And
mm,
in fact, somebody actually told me, he said that, look, if you want to engage with the population of your audience or something like that, you should stay away of the polarizing issue because you will lose people.
mm,
Some people who disagree with you will be like, oh shit, I don't like this guy anymore because
mm.
he has this other view. He's one of them,
I see.
you
Understand.
know. So I mean, in a way, I take that risk, lah, and I'm sure I've lost followers because of that. Or like, but I don't know, bro. Like I said, I don't really have a plan.
Mm,
I'm just doing what I believe in.
I see. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, respect for that. I mean, like, if it suits your nature, then like that's totally, I think, like what makes sense. Yeah, you do you, bro.
yeah,
So thank you for that. Now to
yeah.
kind of follow up on that, right? I am curious about this idea, right, of whether you feel in any way, right, that education, right, is something that's important for creating content. Because, like, of course, you're creating content, you're saying like different things out there, but of course, like, there's always some sort of like structure and idea, right, or something that goes along in your head. So then, of course, you have also like the odd person out there who goes and starts dancing. And I'm not saying that dancing doesn't require education. I'm sure that a lot of people like go
Mm.
for professional dance classes, right? And then, of course, you also have people who go on TikTok who create things like this. Let me show you. Yeah, who become famous by creating stuff like this.
Mm.
Sebab apa gagal BI? Sebab kita orang Melayu bukan orang British and stuff of that nature right there. And maybe that's a political view, that kind of thing, right? But of course, on the other end of the spectrum, then you have people like Khairul Aming who are like highly educated, like yourself, of course, and they're going out there and creating this sort of content. Like in your mind, right? Do you feel that maybe people should be educated in some way, shape, or form, or that there's a sort of like barrier, I guess, that a person should cross before even thinking about going out and creating content?
So controversial, right? I don't think like education is a good measure of whether someone's intelligent or even if someone has critical thinking or not.
Mm,
I just don't. Like like you can see what we get like fake news all the time now on WhatsApp and all that stuff. Whether it's like political views, whether it's like vaccines, whether it's all this shit, you know what I mean? And you can see some of the most educated people go against all the science or anything like that and say, hey, no, this is not true. And then if you say, but this is the evidence, they say, yeah, but the evidence is fake, or the data is questionable. Like and they're all highly educated. They come from good universities and everything. So I really don't think that education is even a good measure
Mm,
or even a strong correlation with essentially critical thinking lah. I mean, we're not really necessarily saying intelligence, but very specifically critical thinking lah. You know,
mm,
and yeah, yeah. So I don't really think that's the case lah. Yes, I'm educated, but honestly, I also question myself sometimes. Hey, maybe my beliefs are because I'm in this echo chamber. Because the algorithm, YouTube or all that, that does that to you, right? If they see that you have a certain political view, it'll feed you more of that and less of
mm.
that. To some extent, I think I can't deny that I've been shaped by the algorithm also. You know what I mean? My views maybe have been shaped by the algorithm.
Wow, like, can you say like how you've been shaped by the algorithm? Like, if you know.
Okay, so for example, I'm very um pro Gaza, pro Palestine and all that.
Mm,
Can someone argue that I have been shaped by the algorithm because they detect that I have this view, and so they anchor me more into it by feeding more of this content. You know,
mm,
I think that's entirely possible. Whether on TikTok or YouTube and all that. And it has the opposite effect on other people maybe.
mm,
So yeah, and I guess throughout history also have our views always been shaped by the media. Yeah, I guess
mm,
we have said our views have been shaped by the media too. And now the media is what the For You page chooses to push you lah.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. That is interesting. Still though, if we look at like everything that you do create, right? It's not just you, I guess, that's like creating content. Like your entire family creates content. Audrey creates content. Your kids, Fighter and Penny, also are like participants in creating content. Nice thought, by the way. And
Yeah.
so when you think about all of this, right? How do you feel about content creation and its role in your family life, bro? Like when we think about like creating content, right? It's like also about, like what you choose to reveal, like how you're seen and stuff of that nature. Like, was it always natural, I guess, like for your entire family to be like creating and then like putting yourselves out there? Or like what has that been like for you?
Yeah, actually I think it has because um Audrey's always been an influencer. I mean, I've had some following always, but I've never been that serious about it until recently. In the past, like, sometimes you'll see me not post anything for like weeks or months, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Um and and Audrey would, but Audrey is quite active in that front lah. So my kids grew up in that environment too, and of course we're quite conscious lah. We always now we have to ask our kids permission every time. Can we post this? Can we post this? Are you okay? And if they're okay, then they're
mm,
okay. But if not.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah, we've kind of grown up in that kind of setting lah. Um, have we given up some things? Yeah, we totally have. Like privacy. Um, criticism, trolls, all sorts of stuff like, there's always a price to pay for anything in life.
Mm,
If you want something, you have to give up something. If you give
mm,
up the thing you want, then you're also giving up something. So
I
yeah,
see.
just that.
Yeah, it's kind of like how we, for example, use mobile phones that allow us to save our contacts and then we forget the phone numbers of the people closest to us, or maybe like we use AI and then somehow some parts of us break in unpredictable ways, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, that is interesting to think about. When you think about, I guess, like social media though, like one common thing that like people sort of like point to though is maybe this idea, right, of mental health. And I know that you've also shared quite a fair bit about like your own mental health on social media and stuff of that nature right there. And rather than like I guess think about I guess how social media has allowed you to express, I guess, your thoughts about like your own condition, right? We often hear stories about how, like, oh, social media causes people to compare themselves unrealistically to others. They come off unfavorably in the comparison. As a result, then they end up becoming sad or depressed or otherwise. I guess maybe I want to know what you think about whether you feel that social media can actually have a sort of like positive role in people's mental health.
Yeah, I think that of course there could be benefits, like awareness and all that through social media, but generally I think net it could, depending on the person, it could be a net negative still of how it feels
Mm,
and and I don't think it's just about comparing necessarily, but maybe sometimes it's about the dopamine hits. It's like always getting hit by dopamine, and sometimes you just take it and as because you keep getting hit by it, then you have the craving of having need dopamine all the time,
mm,
and then you get more hooked onto it, so I think there's an argument that it could be a net negative, lah, but there are definitely some benefits to it.
mm. I see. Cool. Well, but nonetheless, right, you've definitely personally stepped up when it comes to like creating reels and content and everything like that. Do you remember what made you start to escalate, I guess, that posting frequency? Because, like, again, like, the rate at which you post is just.
Oh, yeah. I don't know actually. I just happened to like, at first I just started, okay lah, once a day lah. Then after that, oh, okay, then I got this, then I got this. I don't know, it just happened. And maybe I'll cut down at some point, but I don't know.
Okay. Got you,
Yeah,
got you.
I really don't have this plan, and it really didn't. It wasn't some smart, brilliant master plan or anything like that. I didn't plan for this, honestly. It just happened, and I can't claim credit for that lah. And I
Mm,
don't even know where it's going.
mm,
It could really end anytime.
I see.
Yeah.
Understand, understand. Well, even if, right, like it could end anytime, even if somehow or another the algorithm could say, all right, sorry, no more Tim, like cut off, bye,
Mm.
kalas, sorry, type thing,
Mm.
right? What do you personally want, I guess? Because, I mean, you could say like it could end anytime, right? But like maybe we have at least some influence in terms of like maybe the direction that we might want to take things. So, what do you feel like you want, I guess, from the next phase, I guess, of your influencer life?
Mm.
If you could have anything that you want come to life.
Mm. Yeah, this is like one of those like Miss World questions, like what do you want in life? And it's like, oh, world peace and everything. And the world peace answer for an influencer would probably be, like, oh, I want to make an impact on people's life, on social issues and all this shit. Honestly, that's my world peace answer, lah. But in all fairness, like I think like what a person would want is like, that it gives me an edge in life, in business, in my work I
Mm,
do and everything. I mean, like we want that edge, and I don't know in what shape or form that edge will come, but I'm hoping like just like in anything else we do or we commit our times to, that it gives us an edge to improve our lives.
mm,
Um, it could be financially, although honestly I don't think it's going to be financially because honestly, um, I've seen an influencer, I've seen how much influencers make, man. I used to run and do that, and I know for sure that it really, really doesn't last. And I know that it's very hard to make that kind of money.
mm,
So it's not money, but maybe an edge somewhere else. Like, maybe familiarity, somebody knows you and it's like, okay, I'm more likely to give you this deal. Or some people start their brands, because of the fans or something like, but an edge in life,
mm,
because hey, sometimes it's just what we need, right? We all just need our small little edges in life.
mm.
And world peace. you Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. I
Yeah.
noticed also that you like do work with a lot of different types of people, I guess. So like what would you I guess like look for in terms of like people that you would want to work with on this sort of like influencer journey, even as you're kind of like navigating with this new and interesting environment that we're in?
Well, you mean in what sense? Like, you mean other influences or you mean like just people generally?
Well, like for example, like businesses or like say people that suit your vision, that kind of thing, right there. And I noticed that you tend to do a lot of like collaborations with like lots of different people out there. So then, like I guess, what in your mind suits I guess the people that you want to work with or that you want to create with as you kind of like carve out the influencer journey? Because it seems to be like a sort of like daily ongoing thing.
Okay, so if you notice, like okay, so I haven't had a chance to collaborate with many influencers.
Mm,
Um, and maybe because maybe my introvert nature, so I, I don't collab so much, but at the same time, you know, if you're talking about like brands and advertising and all that,
mm,
I'm quite so it's not my full-time thing. This isn't really my full-time thing. It's like a side gig. And for me, like I'm always so for me, I because it's my side gig, I can get to pick and choose a little bit, I guess. And so for me, it's always like, okay, I'll do it. I only want to do an ad if it really fits into my current pipeline of content,
mm,
not not like force an ad just for that shit. You know what I mean? Like I would just rather not do that shit lah. If I can. And it works because then like I love it when my carousel people say, yeah, fuck, it's just this ad was just perfect for it or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I clearly
mm,
labeled it a freaking ad. It's very obvious it's an ad, but I just like it when it just fits in lah. For me.
mm.
So for me it's like I have this idea of content I want to make, and it's just like okay, what other pieces of the puzzle can come into it lah.
I see, I
Yeah.
see. Cool. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And last question, because I know that you have to go like pretty
Mm.
soon. But yeah, when you think about, I guess, like this whole influencer scape and where we are at the moment, where do you think it is that we're going at the moment? Like, do you feel that influencers are going to be a thing, I guess, like in the future? Or do you think that maybe we'll all be replaced by AIs and virtual influencers who will take up like our entire FYPs, leaving human beings with no role in the world?
Oh, wow, I really don't know, man, this one. Because okay, AI in its current form, probably not, because it's just like so obvious it's AI, you know what I mean? It's just not that good. But heck, it's developing so fast, right? In 1 year, you probably won't even tell if it's Tim or an AI,
Mm,
like right now you can tell. Right now I can have an AI that like replicate me and do it, and you can tell by the mouth movements and everything. But honestly, the way it's developing so fast, you can who the hell knows, man? And I've been like wrong at so many things in life. I've predicted many things to be wrong.
mm.
Like and so I've learned not to predict things in life because most of my predictions come wrong.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's okay. It's par for the course for economics graduates.
Yeah, I mean, if I were that smart, right? If I'm predicting everything right, I just think like be making tons of money from the stock market and all that. You know what I mean? If I could see that this AI thing is going to be this big, like 2 years ago, yeah, we knew it was big, but heck, who knew when you bought back in? Heck, you know what? In January this year, I was in Shanghai, and I was looking at PopMart. You know what I mean? I was like, hmm, wow, a lot of people. Then after that, my friends were saying, yeah, but I think it's the Bobo thing is coming to an end. It's coming to an end, till the end of it. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Fuck, if I bought in January, even though it's gone up so much, you'll probably have another 3, 4, 5x or something like that. So honestly, like the more I know in life, the more I realize that I know so fucking little.
Okay.
You know?
Understand, understand.
And that's why like when people ask me for this kind of podcast and everything, right, bro, like like all this kind of things, I always tell them like, um, first I often don't quite want to do it lah.
Oh, is that
But
honor?
but for
Thank you.
you, but for you, I want to do it because for you, it's like I can see that it's like personal passion and everything. You know what I mean? And I can see that. I can see it's your personal passion. And so okay, I want to be a part of it and support it. It takes me 1 hour of
Thank
my
you.
day.
Mm,
But I don't want to do it because I can't come off on that as like this guru in podcast speaking because honestly, I just feel like I really don't know that much lah. I can't delude myself, to believe that I'm that smart lah. You know.
mm,
And if people perceive me as very smart or anything like that, I'll always tell them like, really? Because I don't think so. Because if
mm.
because I don't think so. Like I said, most of my predictions are all fucking wrong, man. What do I know? So
Some people might say that it's always the smart ones that talk like that.
yeah, but what do I know? You know what I mean? Like I'm being honest here. I didn't plan this current uptrend in my social media. Like, I didn't plan. I just started working on it and then it just happened.
Mm,
How do I know, man? Like, so, and that's why I really think, like, success in everything in everything is always like a huge percentage of luck,
mm,
not just not just hard work, lah. Like a lot of people put in the work, but they just don't see results. And I told my son this.
mm,
Um, I told my son, and I'm very proud of him for that because he's very into dodgeball,
mm.
but he's not very good at it, right? And he's always trying to get to the first team, but he keeps just trying. He gets rejection after rejection, but keeps trying. And I said, wow, I really admire that because motivation is very easy to come, right, when you're seeing results. But motivation is very hard to come when you don't see results. But that's when it's the most important.
Amen.
Like you can post this video, you can post this video, you can post like a lot of videos. If you post this video and you get, let's say, 50,000 views, that gives you motivation to do more. But heck, maybe you can post 10 videos and maybe you get like a few hundred views each. And then after a while, you post 20 and you still get a few hundred views. And then you're like, fuck that. Why am I doing this? And then you quit, But and sometimes maybe that's the most important time to have motivation.
Mm, wow. And that was you having a human influencer on me. So there you go, like
Yeah.
influencer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, thanks so much, Tim. Like, I guess do you have any like parting words of, I guess, wisdom or like things that you want to share with the audience or like maybe things that you want to plug out there, projects, whatever have you?
Uh, uh, mm, I think while all this is great, I think I'm still very focused on like kind of my business, like Colony, Jerry, and also we acquired Dough by Mac, right? Which does a granola thing that's really popular. Have you tried that?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. I should send you some, but it's just a
Thank you.
granola product that we did, like that. It's like it really does well. And again, this is one thing that came out of this by luck, by influence. I just start posting about it, sending to people, and then after they like it, they start posting it sometimes, and it just took off, lah.
Mm,
So yeah, I mean, it's just I mean, they always say like you have always have a plan in life. I
mm,
don't know if I have a plan.
mm.
I just know that okay, I'm just working, doing this. I think it's heading to the right direction, and then it just happens, or
Wow.
it doesn't happen. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna show you what my WhatsApp status message is, and
Uh,
this actually does like come up once in a while, but it just goes.
oh, I can't see. It's all white.
Can't see. Oh, nature does not hurry, but everything is accomplished. Who knows? Like
Yeah.
maybe there is a sort of influencer destiny written in the constellations for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, who knows? Anyway, so thank you, Tim, and it was an honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, bro. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.